Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today we are tackling something that's been making a lot of noise lately, AI, and particularly how it's changing the landscape of learning.
It's certainly a hot topic.
Yeah, it is. We're specifically looking at how secondary school students are using these large language models.
Like the programs that can practically whip up a novel in the blink of an eye.
Exactly. And I've got some research here that might just turn your thinking upside down about the best ways to learn. It's fascinating stuff.
Definitely. And this study really gets into the nitty-gritty. How students are using these tools. We're talking GPT 3.5 specifically.
Oh, yeah. GPT 3.5, the engine behind ChatGPT. So before we get into the research itself, could you give us a quick breakdown of what GPT 3.5, or any large language model for that matter, actually is?
Sure.
So I think a lot of folks have heard of the term, but might not truly grasp what's going on under the hood.
Right. Well, at its core, a large language model like GPT 3.5 is a type of AI trained on a massive amount of text data. Think books, articles, websites, code, basically anything and everything you can find digitally.
Oh, wow.
This training allows it to understand and then generate human-like text, which is why it can pull off things like writing essays, translating languages, even answering your questions in a surprisingly conversational way.
So it's kind of like having a superpowered research assistant at your fingertips.
That's a good way to put it.
Except this one runs on algorithms and data instead of caffeine and late-night study sessions.
Sure, right.
But what's really interesting to me is how students are actually using these tools out in the real world.
Yeah.
And that's where this research comes in, right?
Absolutely. The researchers wanted to pit GPT 3.5 against a more traditional learning method, note-taking.
Note-taking.
They split 405 secondary school students into two groups, each with different instructions on how to use the LLM and note-taking while they studied.
Okay. So it was like an AI versus human brain showdown.
Not exactly a showdown, but a really clever way to compare these two approaches.
Okay, I like it. I'm picturing students furiously scribbling notes in one corner while others are having a casual chat with the AI in the other.
Well, maybe not that dramatic. But to really test what they learned, students were given comprehension and retention tests 3 days later.
Okay, I see.
And that's where things get really interesting.
Ooh, I am all ears. Spill the tea. Did the AI whiz kids dominate, or did pen and paper prevail?
The results might actually surprise you.
Okay.
The students who took notes, either alone or with the LLM, actually performed significantly better on those tests compared to students who only used GPT 3.5.
Wait, seriously, so good old-fashioned note-taking is still the champ?
It seems so.
Even in the age of AI. Wow. Why do you think that is?
The researchers think it has to do with what they call desirable difficulty.
Desirable difficulty, okay.
Essentially, the effort you put into taking notes, summarizing information in your own words, making connections between ideas, forces you to engage with material in a much deeper way. It's like building mental muscle. The more you challenge yourself, the stronger you get.
So even though using the LLM might feel easier and more efficient at the time, it might not be leading to that same level of understanding and retention.
That's exactly right. And it really highlights the importance of something called metacognition.
Meta what now? You might have lost me there. Could you break that down a bit?
Sure. Metacognition is basically thinking about your own thinking. It's being aware of how you learn best.
Right.
What strategies work for you, what your strengths and weaknesses are. And in this case, the students relying just on the LLM might not have been doing that deeper metacognitive processing.
So they might have felt like they were learning because the AI was giving them all the answers and making things seem easy. But they weren't necessarily developing that same depth of understanding like the note takers were.
Exactly.
It's kind of like using GPS to get everywhere, right? Sure, it gets you where you need to go, but you probably don't learn the streets as well as you would if you'd taken the time to study a map and figure out the route on your own.
That's a great analogy.
And I think a lot of people can probably relate to that feeling of relying on technology to do the thinking for them. But here's the thing. Even though note-taking was shown to be more effective for learning, the research found that students actually preferred using the LLM.
Yeah.
They found it more helpful, enjoyable, and easier. Talk about a mind-boggling paradox.
It's a fascinating finding, isn't it? And it really highlights the complexity of this issue. Just because something feels easy and enjoyable doesn't necessarily mean it's the most effective for learning. And this is where things get really interesting.
All right, so we've got this tension. Note-taking comes out on top when it comes to learning, but the LLM is winning the popularity contest. What gives? Why are students so drawn to the AI, even if it's not giving them the best results?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question. And the researchers didn't stop at just the test scores. They wanted to understand how students were actually interacting with the LLM, so they dug into thousands of the prompts students used.
So they peeked behind the curtain to see what kinds of questions students were throwing at the AI.
Right.
Were they trying to get the AI to, like, write their essays for them or something?
Not quite that dramatic. But what they found was really quite remarkable. Most students were using the LLM to try to understand things better, asking sophisticated questions that went beyond just summarizing the text.
Oh, interesting. So they were using it more as a personal tutor than a cheat sheet. Give me an example. What kind of questions were they asking?
Well, one of the texts was about Nelson Mandela and the fight against apartheid in South Africa. One student, after reading about his time in prison, asked the LLM, what was Mandela's life story? Showing real intellectual curiosity.
Wow, that's pretty cool. That's not just trying to skate by on a test. That's someone who wants to learn more, dig deeper into history. Were there other examples like that?
Absolutely. Another text covered the Cuban Missile Crisis. And one student, probably realizing he needed some background, asked, why was America afraid of communism? They were using the LLM to, fill in gaps in their knowledge and get a more nuanced understanding of the historical context.
That's fascinating. It sounds like students weren't just taking the easy way out. They were genuinely trying to learn and explore with this tool.
Exactly. And the researchers categorized these student prompts into 4 main archetypes. The first, and the most common, is what we've been talking about, seeking additional information and deeper understanding.
Okay, what were the other 3?
The second most common was information condensation. So asking for summaries, key points, that kind of thing.
Right.
The third was basic understanding of the text, like defining terms or getting simpler explanations.
So a mix of wanting to get the big picture and also getting help with the smaller details. What about the 4th, the less common one?
That was requesting direct study and memory help, like asking for quizzes or memory tricks.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. It's interesting because they weren't told they would be tested, but they were still seeking ways to, help the information stick.
So we've got these 4 main archetypes, most of which show a genuine desire to learn. But if most students prefer the LLM, and they're using it for more than just getting quick answers, why is note-taking still proving to be the MVP for actual learning?
Well, the study also considered how students perform when they combined LLM use with note-taking. And the findings there might give us some clues.
So let's talk about this combining of LLM and note-taking. Did mixing the old with the new create some kind of learning superpower?
Well, not a superpower exactly, but the results are worth a closer look.
Okay.
The study looked at 3 different approaches. Note-taking first, then using the LLM. Using the LLM first, and then taking notes. And of course, just using the LLM on its own.
Okay, so mixing and matching, I like it. What did they find?
It's interesting. The group that took notes alongside the LLM actually ended up asking fewer questions of the AI.
Fewer questions. Do you think having that notepad handy encouraged them to, wrestle with the material a bit more before turning to the AI for help?
That's a really plausible explanation. It suggests they were more actively engaged, trying to process the information themselves and come to their own understanding before they sought out, outside assistance.
Right.
And another interesting finding was that students in both of the note-taking groups, regardless of when they used the LLM, ended up writing roughly the same amount.
Yeah, around 100 words if I remember correctly. But wasn't there a catch? Something about copying.
Yes, you're right. A pretty significant portion of students, about 25%, ended up copying a lot of the LLM's output directly into their notes.
Oh, really?
And some were even more blatant. About 16% showed almost complete copying.
Yikes, not exactly the deep engagement we were hoping for. More like a Control-C, Control-V approach to note-taking.
Definitely not ideal. It kind of highlights one of the potential pitfalls of having information so easily accessible. It's easy to fall into that trap of passive absorption instead of active processing and synthesizing.
It reminds me of those websites, Spark Notes, where you could read a summary of a book instead of actually reading the book. Sure, you might get the gist, but you miss out on all the nuance, all the depth.
Exactly. And the study also found that students who used the LM alone spent less time on the task compared to those who also took notes.
So less time, but lower scores.
Yeah.
Seems like the note takers, even if they might have grumbled a bit about it, were really onto something.
Yeah, the evidence really does point to that idea that deeper engagement, even when it's harder and takes more time, really does pay off in the long run.
Okay, so we've got this paradox, right? Students love using the LLM. They say it's helpful, it's enjoyable, but it's not necessarily leading to the best learning outcomes, not like note-taking. What do you think this means for the future of learning? Are we all doomed to become these, like, AI-dependent zombies who can't remember anything without consulting a chatbot?
I don't think we're headed for a zombie apocalypse just yet. This research really shines a light on both the benefits and the pitfalls of using AI in education. It's not about AI replacing human intelligence.
Right.
It's about finding ways for AI to complement our own abilities.
Right.
To help us become better learners and thinkers and creators.
So how do we strike that balance? How do we use AI without sacrificing those essential learning processes that have, served us well for so long?
That's a great question, and there are no easy answers. But this research does offer some valuable insights. One suggestion is to separate the LLM use from the note-taking. Have students read a text, then explore it further with the LLM, and then take notes independently, without that temptation to just copy and paste.
So forcing them to, synthesize the information themselves and make those connections in their own minds. Simple, but potentially very effective.
Exactly.
Any other ideas?
Another key takeaway is that guidance and training are super important. We can't just throw these powerful AI tools at students and expect them to figure it all out on their own. Educators have a crucial role to play in helping them develop those skills to ask the right questions, to critically evaluate the information they're getting from the LLM, and use it as a starting point for deeper learning, not a crutch.
It's like that saying, give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, but teach a man to fish, you feed him for a lifetime.
Exactly.
But in this case, it's more like, teach a student how to use AI effectively, and you empower them to become a lifelong learner.
I like that.
Right. We need to equip them with the skills to navigate the ever-evolving world of information, AI or not.
Absolutely. Those skills, critical thinking, information literacy, are essential.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what technology is at their fingertips.
It's funny, we started this deep dive talking about how AI could maybe replace human intelligence, but what this research really shows is it's not about replacement at all. It's about augmentation. It's about using AI to enhance, not diminish, our own capacity for understanding.
Absolutely. And this study highlights that while AI can open up amazing access to information, there's really no substitute for that active, effortful engagement that leads to true understanding. The desirable difficulty we talked about earlier.
Right.
It might not always be fun and easy, but it's the key to building those mental models that lead to deeper comprehension, long-term retention, those things that really matter.
So, final verdict, is AI a friend or foe to education?
I think it has the potential to be a powerful ally, but like any powerful tool, it needs to be used responsibly.
Right.
We need to be aware of its limitations, its potential downsides, but also embrace its ability to help us explore, question, learn in new and exciting ways.
Well, to our listeners, keep exploring, keep questioning, keep pushing those boundaries of what's possible with AI in education. This is really just the beginning of an incredible journey, and we're all in this together, figuring it out as we go.
Here's to the future of learning.
Cheers to that.